right. Hello and welcome everyone in the audience. My name is Krista Van Hove. I'm a campus planner at Stanford and president of the Northern California ASLA chapter. On behalf of the chapter, thank you for joining Lunch with Leaders, Industry Icons with Andrea Cochran. A couple of announcements before we get started. Our chapter ballot is now live, so you can put in your votes to elect our executive committee officers for next year. Voting ends August 31st. We also have registration open for our annual Giants Night and networking event. It will be on Tuesday, September 14th. So get your tickets soon before they sell out. And lastly, our chapter has hosted this lecture series monthly since summer of 2020. So if you missed any of them, you can find the recordings on the chapter website or our YouTube channel. We have recently announced our guest speakers for the rest of 2021, which includes Mia Lair, Michael Boland, April Phillips, and David Walker. So please sign up and we look forward to seeing you again soon. A couple of housekeeping notes before we start. If you're comfortable, please turn on your cameras. It'd be great to see everyone. And last, please utilize the chat function to submit any questions you have during the presentation. We will save Q&A for the end. Now, I'd like to welcome today's guest, Andrea Cochran, Fellow of ASLA, founder and principal of San Francisco-based Andrea Cochran Landscape Architecture. She has been practicing landscape architecture in the Bay Area for 40 years. Known for seamlessly interweaving sustainable landscapes, art, and architecture, her designs highlight the experiential qualities of the built environment. Her firm has garnered numerous design awards, most notably the Smithsonian's Cooper Hewitt National Design Award in Landscape Architecture. In 2014, Andrea was honored with the ASLA Design Medal. She was the second woman to ever receive this award. And in 2009, Princeton Architectural Press published a monograph of her firm's work. Andrea goes above and beyond when it comes to engaging with her community and advancing the profession of landscape architecture. We are so grateful to have her with us today. You are all in for a very special treat as we get to learn about a very personal side of Andrea and the journey she has been on to where she has gotten today. So please help me give a warm welcome to Andrea Cochran.
Thank you, Krista. So today, I originally started this for this presentation with a group of women from WXLA talking. We were going to do a lecture at the ASLA convention last year, which of course didn't happen. And they minimized the amount that were going to be online. So our panel, which was covering women talking about different aspects of the career, someone who was new to the profession, who'd practiced for a couple of years, someone who'd practiced for 10 years, and then I was the kind of elder statesman talking about my journey and my career. So because that didn't happen, we ended up having a much shorter presentation with about 12 people who were going to get scholarships to attend the ASLA conference. And those people had a little kind of like session with the three of us presenting. So that was the impetus to start this. And when I speak a lot at universities, or I used to before the pandemic, and a lot of times students will come up to me or young professionals and say, well, how do you do this? Where do you get your ideas? How did you get where you are? And I think it's hard to realize that I've been working for 40 years, and it is it's a long career and a path that always wasn't so straightforward. I feel like I was the slow learner. I remember George Hargraves was in my class and started his office when he was like 27, and I was 44. So, I'm a slow learner. So anyway, and I came through a winding path. So I thought it might be helpful to people to know that there is no straight path, and everybody has their own journey. And I'm just going to talk about mine today, and maybe it kind of gives you some perspective on, how wonderful it is to be a landscape architect and within one career. I mean, I think the average person has 4 or 5 careers. And I feel like I've definitely had that many within the profession of landscape architecture. And it's so wonderful to have different aspects of the profession. So I'm just going to go through, I kind of divided my career into time frames. So the early years, college, graduate school, early jobs, transformative time, kind of finding my place in the profession through a lot of false starts, and then establishing ACLA in 1999, and then talking about some early projects, and then more recent work, well, not so recent, the last 15, 16, 17 years, and then kind of how that looks now in the way our firm is run. So the early years. I wanted to go to art school, and my parents told me that I needed to support myself, which I thought was wise advice. And so I couldn't go to art school, and I was, obviously not happy about that or sad, but I went to my second career choice was to be a veterinarian. I think, I always loved the natural sciences. And I thought, well, I'll become a veterinarian. And so I attended Rutgers, which had kind of like Davis had an ag school, and with the idea that I would study animal science and go to veterinary school. So I think I'm ADD. I've never been diagnosed, but I don't read things very carefully a lot of the times. And I clearly didn't read the acceptance form that I was supposed to select all my classes before I got to college. And I got there the first day, and I was not registered for any of my classes. And so I was running around like crazy trying to get registered. And the one class that didn't fit in my schedule was animal sciences. So I thought my life is over. The one class I'm taking besides chemistry and biology and English, this is the one class I really want to take for my future career. And so I was in the dean's office with my parents. I don't know how I ended up there, but anyway, the dean said to me, look, this will fit in your schedule. It's a great class for freshmen. It's called Environmental Issues. And at that class, I think so many of us find landscape architecture in weird ways, and this definitely was a weird way. He said, look, this class will fit in. Why don't you take it? So I took the class. It was a 1-credit survey class, and people came in every week and talked about a different aspect of landscape architecture. So someone came and spoke from environmental research group. People talked about different career paths. Somebody else talked about botany, and then someone came who was the chair of the landscape architecture department at Rutgers and talked about landscape architecture. And all of a sudden the light bulb went off. Oh, art and science, I could combine them and become a landscape architect. So I actually never took an animal science class. I changed my major, and that was the beginning of my career. My first, I worked in nurseries. I did, I had, summer jobs like that. But the one that was probably the most transformative was working my first job at Six Rivers National Forest up in Northern California in Humboldt County. And we were part of a team of 6 women that were going through the forest and mapping a recreation inventory of the entire forest. And we were on logging roads, and we were the purpose of it was to do a recreation inventory and it was a pilot study to test out this program that one of the foresters had established to determine how do you weigh logging benefits versus recreational benefits, and beauty is one of them. So we drove around in 2 Datsun pickup trucks through the summer and camped out all summer. It was the first time I'd been in California. And I learned to drive a stick shift on logging roads. And, it was just an incredible experience. But what was very interesting to me, it was the first time that I think I'd really been exposed to um, sexism. And I found that, the women who worked on the fire crew, if they were, inevitably there'd be romances that would happen between people on the fire crew that worked together closely. And if someone was found, the head of the forest, if he was driving around and he saw somebody's truck parked in somebody else's house overnight and knew they were sleeping together, the woman would get fired, not the guy. So this to me was kind of an eye opener that, things were not equal. And we actually got the job, which was a huge benefit to me because I was a woman and they were trying to up their number of women employees in the Forest Service. So it looked like they were a more equal opportunity employer. So I thought this was a great job to have this benefit, but then the reality of it was, well, we really had to be very careful and be very professional, much more professional than the men. So that was sort of a transitional time. And then, at college, in my class of landscape architecture, there were 45 students, 4 of them were women. So it was, less than 10%. And, you learn to be one of the guys and, that was the way it was. And I got my first job when I graduated with the National Park Service. Again, I got hired, I think, because I was a woman and they had certain quotas of filling the job. It was a 6-month appointment. So at the end of 6 months, the job ended. And I worked designing campgrounds and, areas like Mount Desert Island. The job was in Boulder, Colorado, in Denver, Colorado, but we were designing campgrounds all over the country and recreation areas for the Park Service. So it was a wonderful opportunity, and I realized that it was not a career in public service was not for me. That was a second learning experience. When I got back to the East Coast, so I was born and raised, and I was born in New York and raised mostly in Long Island and New Jersey. So I got a job in a firm in Philadelphia, and this was in 1977. It was right after the bicentennial. And most of the projects then, the economy wasn't great. And a lot of projects, the Middle East was kind of like China is today. Everybody was doing projects in the Middle East because there were tons of work there. And they were, the oil industry was, really funding that. So there were these pipelines that went through the country of Saudi Arabia, and new cities were planned for each end of the pipeline. And then we also worked in Iran. It was just before the Shah was deposed. And so it was a very interesting time to be working in a different culture. So I worked there for about 9 months. And then I applied to graduate school at Harvard, the GSD. When I got there, the demographics of the class had changed. And that was actually about 50% women were in graduate school then with me at the time. And, it was a great class. I know Mia Lair is speaking next week. Mia was in my class. George Hargraves was in my class. We had a really interesting class, and a lot of people did, really went on to have great careers. I graduated in 1979. And I got my first job after graduation at an architecture firm. And I think that's really shaped a lot of my career. I think a lot of people would notice that our work tends to have a sort of an architectural bent, or it's a little bit, I think, formalist. And I think some of that comes from working for architects early in my career. But what we were working on was new towns in Saudi Arabia with Bechtel and big firms like that doing these cities, which I was told at the time might be for like 30,000 people. I think right now, I talked to someone recently, and I think those cities are now up to 300,000 people. So, working, and Mr. Sert, who had been the dean at Harvard, was urban design. He was known for his urban design expertise. And so it was a very transformative time to be doing those projects. But also, as a woman, I could not visit Saudi Arabia because you could only visit there. And so I could never go on a site visit. I could never look at a job because you had to travel with your father or your brother Certainly not with your coworkers or your boss. That would be a bad thing. So that was another interesting time. And I felt like for a long time I was working on projects and not really learning anything, because those projects were, I would never see them built. They were just projects on paper. And for me, I couldn't make the leap between the work I was doing and actual reality. I've never seen any of these projects built. And at that point in 1981, I wanted to see the world. I thought about different places I could go. And I heard about a job in Hong Kong or Lagos, Nigeria. Lagos seemed a little scary. And then I heard about a firm in Athens. It was a Greek firm that was doing work in the Middle East. And at that time, there had been a long civil war in Lebanon, and that was kind of the cultural capital of the Mediterranean. And the Greek government offered all these benefits for all these companies to move to Athens and do work in the Middle East. So I worked with an incredible group of people from the AA in London, the GSD, and we were, again, designing these new cities in Saudi Arabia. And every weekend we'd go to an island and do things. It was a wonderful opportunity for somebody in their 20s. After that was over, I moved to California. It was a really bad economy in 1981. And I then decided that I would move here because I heard there was work. I knew that AECOM, which was then EDA, had work. They were doing work all over the world. I thought maybe I could get a job there. And as it turned out, I got a job with a firm called the Planning Collaborative, which no longer exists. And I worked there for a few years, and then eventually moved on to Roma Design Group, which was and still is a multidisciplinary design, urban design, landscape architecture, and architecture. At the time, they did more architecture, and now they are more urban design. But anyway, so I worked at both those places, and I was laid off. And at the time, so I worked on the American Embassy in Bahrain, which is the picture below. So I designed the landscape for that embassy. Now but again, I never saw it built. And this photo, I think I found it online or someone sent it to me, but I've never been. So it was a very interesting time. Oops, I hit the wrong thing. That was a very interesting time. And then I got laid off. And, sometimes you need to get kicked out of the nest, and nobody wants to start a firm. It's a scary thing to start your own firm. You feel like, you're not going to have a regular paycheck. Those are all frightening things. So getting laid off kind of says, okay, if you really want to do it, now's the time to do it. So I started a firm with a friend that I had worked at the Planning Collaborative. And her husband got a job she had grown up in my partner had grown up in the Bay Area. So she had lots of contacts. And but her husband got a job with the Wilderness Society after a year, and we had to, and I couldn't continue because I had only lived in the Bay Area for a few years, and my professional contacts were, these ginormous projects, and no one was going to hire me to design a new city in Saudi Arabia, like on my own. So it was not a great, it wasn't a great timing for me. And so I was just trying to figure out what to do. And there was this guy, Emery Rogers, who'd had a firm, and I thought maybe that he and I could work together. So we started to set up an office. And then one day, Topher Delaney called me up and said, do you know anybody who could help me on a project? And I said, no, I don't really know anybody. And then I finally realized she was asking me. And so it turned out she was going to leave for India for a month and wanted to find somebody to help out. I could take care of the office through some of their projects while she was away. And so, and then I said to Emery, well, Topher asked me to do this. We don't really have any projects together yet. Maybe I'll help her out for a couple months, and then we'll get our thing going. And so that's how it started. And then when I was there, a week or two after I was helping her, Topher was diagnosed with breast cancer. And I said to her, I'm really having a good time with this design build. It was all the things that I had been missing before. I wanted that, I wanted to go to art school. I wanted to make things. And when you're doing design build work, especially with someone who comes from a strong art background, the idea of combining the building kind of filled in all the gaps to me for all the times and all the years that I had been working on projects and feeling frustrated because I wasn't seeing them built. So what started out as something that was going to last for a couple of months ended up lasting almost 10 years. And so during that time, the one of the projects above was a house we did on Telegraph Hill for Steve Oliver, and the idea of this kind of blurring of borders and translucency and layering. And then, by trying these things out on the residential projects, and when we got a larger project, which was the Portland Art Museum, then we were able to, because we had done this work on the residential scale, we're able to then apply things to this art museum, which we would never allowed us to have done before. But because we had tried things out on a small scale, we were able to apply it to the larger scale. And that's something that I really have felt has shaped our work. And as you know, now about half our work is residential work and the other half is other kinds of work. And I feel that our planting designs are much more innovative because we are able to try things on a smaller scale with good gardeners. And then also we can try some details out with very high-end contractors before we try it on a low bid job. So anyway, that was really a transformative 10 years. And then towards the end of that time, the relationship was starting to deteriorate and I thought, well, maybe I should be looking at something else, but I really hadn't planned anything. And then I was diagnosed with breast cancer, and I suddenly thought, you know what, there's too much stress here. I need to move on. So I left, and then I got a teaching position just by coincidence at UC Davis for a quarter that kind of helped with that transition. And so that was the next kind of phase. But, like when you start a job, when you start an office, it's nice to have a little money saved. I wasn't married. I didn't have a second income. I owned a house, which I had mortgage payments. And all of a sudden I made very little money teaching at Davis. When you're just starting teaching like that, they don't pay well. And I really thought, oh boy. And so, but I decided that, if I'm going to do it, now's the time. So I took jobs, which you will never, ever know. I have actually blanked them from my mind because they were so ordinary and really not great. But, I did whatever it took. I remember getting one check and it was going to just cover my mortgage and I had no money. And I thought, oh, wow, thank God. And, it was Christmas time at this point, and it was about, it was like about 9 months after I'd left the partnership. And I ran into Wendy Suji over at, I was Christmas shopping over in 4th Street. And she asked me, she said, oh, I heard you retired. And I said, Wendy, I don't have a trust fund. I can't retire. And she said, oh, well, we have this project, this hotel. And, would you like to put a proposal together for it? And so I said, okay, great. So over Christmas, I wrote it and I submitted it. And she was doing it with David Baker. And that was the first, I think our fee was $55,000. And I thought, okay, that will support me. Now I can work. So the first year I worked out of my house and I hired a few people as contract employees. And then other jobs started to trickle in. This days before the internet, it was very hard to find people. All you had was a phone number. And if your phone number was your previous office, then no one was going to find you. So it took a while for word of mouth to come out and, having lunch with architects and doing that kind of thing. And then finally, a year later, I moved into a shared office space with 2 graphic designers. Oops, sorry, I keep hitting that. Hired my first employee shortly after we moved in. And then the projects I was able to get based on my experience with design build were mostly smaller residential projects. This on the top is a roof garden that we won an ASLA award for in the Hayes Valley area. And then the lower one, it was a showcase house that actually was built and designed and built in 3 months for one of those showcase projects. So these small projects, that one got photographed and was everywhere. And so I was able to use I could design and build these things quickly. And it really put a jump start on my career because I was able to get publicity for this work very quickly, rather than a larger project, you'd have to wait years to get it photographed. So I was able to turn this stuff around very quickly and get press from it, win awards, and that started to build the career. And and then the residential projects were, things that would come one by one. It was very hard to get bigger projects. At the time, people just viewed me as someone who did boutique gardens. And I think part of that, and maybe this isn't completely true, but I think part of it is, as a woman, I think it's hard to be taken seriously in the institutional and commercial world. I think it's changed a lot over the years, but I felt like had I been a guy, it would have been easier for me to do it. And I knew some of my peers that had smaller offices and less experience were actually getting work that I was unable to get. And so, but we kept plugging along. This is Walden Studios. We won an ASLA award for that. And so in 2009, I decided, we'd been a finalist a few times for the Cooper Hewitt National Design Award, and I met a guy who was a book editor and was with Rizzoli, but so I met him at a party, and I said, I think we need to do a book to advance our office stature. And so he said, well, we really wouldn't do it for you, but you might try Princeton Architectural Press. So I went to Princeton Architectural Press, and they agreed to do. They were starting a series of landscape architecture books, and this was the first in the series. And I think it was probably one of the pivotal things in my career to have to put together our work to show people and get it out in the world. And then following that, we did win the Cooper Hewitt National Design Award. And I think that book and the work started to really kind of get to another level at that point. And then I was able to meet Michelle Obama, probably one of the most incredible moments of my life. When I met her, I was speechless. She was a lovely, lovely person. But when you win the Cooper Hewitt, or you did, you would have a luncheon at the White House, and the First Lady would sponsor it. I don't think Mrs. Trump did that, but Barbara Bush did it, and Laura Bush did it, and Michelle Obama. And then that same year, I won the design medal, the ASLA design medal. And so it's work. The office was getting bigger. We were between 12 and 16 people. And then in 2019, Emily Rylander, who had worked with me, I think it's been 18 years now, became a partner. And this project below that we did for Civic Center was Emily's design and her project. So the firm started to transition from just me, but to other people doing really great work. And they had been working on these projects all along. None of these projects are just me, but over time, it's nice to see other people recognized for the work that they're doing. So these are just, kind of just giving you kind of a few more highlights of design awards: Kern House, affordable housing, Stone Edge Farm, Birmingham Residence at 2011, 2012, CVRI, Telegraph Hill Residence, 2015, and then 2019 we won for the Hunter's View affordable housing. Affordable housing has been something that projects that I was able to do over the years because there are points given before minority and women-owned businesses in those types of projects, and the developer has to achieve a certain number of points. So as a woman-owned firm, we were able to use that to get a lot of these projects. And for us, we believe that we should always do part of our work as as giving back. And so we always lose money on these projects. I always say that the amount of award we got for a project is directly proportional to how much money we lost on the project. So none of these projects are, they're not paying for the office. The Birmingham residents above, or the Telegraph Hill residents, those are funding our affordable housing projects for what we lose. But they're really important part of our work. And I think, we like to keep the work diverse. It's interesting. No one just wants to work for rich people. And then we get to where we are now, which is the office. And we continue to be about 2/3 women, and 2 women principals, and 3 women senior associates. So, we try and we want to run an office that is inclusive to everyone, and to also provide opportunities for people to thrive. I think what's been interesting now with COVID is, I remember one of our senior associates came to us just before we shut down in 2020 and said, it's really expensive to live here. The commute times are hard. Most of us live in the East Bay. Could we do some kind of remote work? I was like, no, well, you show us who's done it well, and maybe we'll think about it. And she came up with a couple of examples, which in my mind were not strong endorsements. But isn't it interesting that 3 months later, we're all shut down working remotely, and you know what, we figured out how to do it. I think that's changing how we all work. And so that, I think, is our challenge moving forward, how we're going to return to work. Our office, we're going to start, well, we have planned to start after Labor Day, and we'll see where the Delta virus is. We want people to feel comfortable when they come back, but we're going to start working 2 days a week in the office, that everyone will be there. And then we're going to see, that's our beta trial, as Emily calls it. And then we're going to see how it goes. And then we'll see from there. As I said, as we think about, our office, how do we retain key female employees? There are a lot of women that leave the profession because of having to take some time off for childcare. And we're trying to, work on how we can be inclusive and allow people that opportunity to stay current in the profession and come back and still have a career. So anyway, I think that kind of covers it. And I think we have about 20 minutes left. So if people have questions, I'd be happy to answer the questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Round of applause. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing this journey with us, from the ups and the downs, and overcoming cancer, and, not succeeding at certain things within past firms, but still overcoming that. I see this kind of resilient woman that you are, and it's just so great to be able to know a little bit more about that journey. I'm curious, was there ever a time, whether in your career or owning your own firm, where you didn't think that you could do it, and what was it that kept you going?
One time there was a woman named May Arbogast. I don't know, she died a long time ago. And May was an incredible force. And I remember, as a woman, and she was a plants person, and one of the few women who had firms in the, I think in the 60s and the 70s, into the 80s. And so I met with her one day, because I thought working for a woman who was plant-based, kind of, I could learn a lot. It would be a wonderful opportunity. Well, she and I it was like oil and water. We did not mesh. And she said to me, well, what's your 5-year plan? I was 32. I said, I don't have a 5-year plan. Well, if you don't have a 5-year plan, forget it. And she'd had a hard life. She had been in an internment camp. I mean, she had had a hard life and she was tough as nails. And I just was left there thinking, I'll show you, and so, I've never had a plan, which is, I don't think advice. I was advocate for other people, but I kind of tried to be open to the opportunities as they came. And I think one thing I've learned, if you don't have intention, nothing comes to you. So if you don't think, well, I'd like to have my own firm, the opportunities to have your own firm or to do a certain kind of work are never going to come to you. And so once the intention is in your mind, then you can then when opportunities come, then you're open to them. You don't disregard them. And I remember times in my life when, well, I thought I could never buy a house in San Francisco, or I thought I could never do this or that. And, opportunities came up that I never would have guessed. So I think there is that intentionality that we all need to keep open and keep open to new ideas and keep hoping. But as I said, I've never had a plan, which, quite frankly, if I had more savings when I started my own business, things would have been easier. I wouldn't have struggled, but you do what you can do and you take what's given to you and you make the best of it.
Yeah, I kind of see life being like the grand masterpiece, and sometimes you can't judge each move that you make along the way, but you just kind of have to trust in that process. And as long as you keep following where your passions take you, eventually you'll end up with a beautiful masterpiece, which it's hard to think that your masterpiece is even near complete, because it already is really inspiring to a lot of us. You touched a little bit on being a woman within a man's world, or like within landscape and entering into landscape architecture. And maybe in the beginning that felt like that was a weakness, but through that has become a strength. So what has being a woman within landscape architecture taught you about how you interact with other colleagues and clients?
Well, I think it's given me some opportunities that I wouldn't have had. I would have had other opportunities if I was a guy, but I had opportunities given to me. And I think building the practice has been, I think we work a lot with repeat architects. I don't think there's as many. I don't want to say guys have big egos, but I think in general women tend to be maybe a little more collaborative, and without making exceptions, because that's a generalization. But I think, personally, I feel like we're really collaborative. We work really, we try to work well with people, and we get a lot of repeat business from architects who enjoy working with us because they feel we're trying to work with them and kind of, when we leave a project, we want to feel like one hand did the whole thing. And so that means being collaborative, and kind of sometimes other people have a better idea than you and you just kind of go with it. So I do think that, and I think, there's a lot of collaborative people, a lot of creative people in my office. So we are collaborative. And I think it's not just my idea or Emily's idea, but it's other people can contribute to the ideas, and they support and make a stronger piece. So I think that makes strong work. I don't know, when I think about early on, like I remember reading, about Gloria Steinem, who's a generation older than me, going to hotels to interview people who had come to town, and she wasn't allowed to go to their rooms because then it would look like she was a prostitute. So, I mean, I think there's just like these little incremental steps that women professionally make. Like, by the time I became into the profession, that would not have that prejudice did not exist. But when I started, like in undergrad with like 4 women and 45 guys, it didn't seem like it was ever going to get to be very it's going to even out. You know what I mean? And I think it's so much better now. But there's still, I mean, look at that Me Too movement. You know, stuff still happens. You know.
Yeah, we're definitely in the process, and
Mhm.
collaboration is only going to get better, I think, moving into the future. We have one question from the audience. Do you feel like it has been helpful to your career and experience to have both your bachelor's and master's in landscape architecture?
I do. I do. I mean, I think yes and no. I feel like the technical aspects of my career, soil science, you know, surveying, things like that, were hugely helpful in I think in rounding me out. I mean, one of my early jobs when I was at Roma, I designed a road to a sewage treatment plant, and I was too dumb to know that that's usually what civil engineers do. And I did it and it got built and it worked, you know, and I just remember going back to the books on, you know, how you let road layouts and, you know, tangents and all those things. And, you know, I think it was helpful to have that kind of background, which you don't learn that in graduate school, really. But in graduate school, you learn to be a really good designer. You learn to think in ways that are much more. You learn that design is actually a process, and that you think. You know, the process can be taught and can make you better. And that I didn't understand until I went to graduate school and I worked but I found that I didn't write well, and I didn't have the you know the good liberal arts background that I think makes someone a much more um, uh, you know, kind of thoughtful person. And so I think the writing and that not having that background, I spent years reading on my own to kind of supplement that. But so I think there's pluses and minuses to both. I think you bring different things to it, whether you have just a master's degree or whether you have both a master's and an undergraduate degree.
Yeah. And so kind of going back to the idea of design, another question came up. Design work has changed so much recently with pen and paper becoming more rare. How do you incorporate the new computer technology into your office's design process?
I personally cannot do anything on the computer. I am a Luddite. So I become like the head with no body. Like I can draw, but like I can't, I can mark things up and I can give people ideas, but I can't do that, which increasingly I feel like it's hard because I have to rely on other people to do that. But in our office, we use, you know, we were early adopter of using SketchUp. I mean, we put things in SketchUp right away, and all of our projects, instead of building like physical models, we're building computer models, and we're using that as a design tool. And so when we were in the office, I would sit with someone, usually one of the younger staff, and we would sit together with the project manager and we walk through the model and then sort of say, well, maybe if we should do this here or do this there, and sort of mark it up that way. So the digital process has been great for our office. And, you know, and now we have things like Lumion and, you know, other, you know, rendering tools that just make the most beautiful, compelling graphics for clients. So that is really important. And, you know, LandFX and all those, you know, those other programs that other people do in the office are all helpful and saving time in different ways. But I don't do it, but it is critical to the office.
Yeah. Have you found any tools helpful during the pandemic and everybody working remotely that you found really helpful?
You know, I really like Zoom. It took me months to figure out that I could actually mark things up on Zoom. But once I discovered that, that's become my favorite program because, you know, we'll talk about something or our model will be on and, you know, I can draw on it. And and I have a tablet. So I have a new laptop that's a tablet. So I can draw. And so I actually think in some ways it's been better for me to collaborate. Although I miss seeing everybody and sitting there and kind of sketching, but this Zoom, I'm like all in. I just, you know, so, you know, I can draw. So that to me is that's been a great tool. And I can be in my pajamas, I can.
We have one more question touching back on women in landscape architecture. You mentioned earlier on that women have to be more professional than men to advance. Are there any moments when you realized you had surpassed that limitation, either through experience, prestige, age, or cultural shift, etc.?
Well, I said that it was more true at that time than it is true now. I mean, that when I made that comment, that was, uh, a while back. I think it's less true now. But I still think that there's a bit of that. And I think, and certainly right now, I do think that we're still judged that way a bit, but it's not like it was. It's getting better and better all the time. But I can't think of a specific incident. I mean, and like where I am now. Yeah, it's funny. It's funny when you're younger. I remember sitting at the table and thinking, no one's listening to me. No one cares what I think, and and I'd be afraid to speak up. And now, once you've got a certain amount of acclaim or a certain kind of gravitas, then all of a sudden everyone looks at you and asks you what you think. Where before I was like begging for someone to ask me what I thought, or and no one cared what I thought. And so, and it's funny, it almost like it happened overnight, because I went from thinking like, how come nobody's listening to me and my voice isn't heard, to all of a sudden like everybody turns and they're looking to me like, well, what do you think? So I don't know when it happened. I've been just trying to think about that, when that change happened. And I don't know if like you win a certain awards or like your stature. I don't know, but all of a sudden it changed. And then people actually cared what I thought. And so, but I don't know when that happened, but there was definitely a point when things switched from just like feeling like, I wasn't heard, to being heard. Um, and, uh, and I think women in particular have a harder time, like, speaking up and doing, sort of grabbing what, the limelight kind of. And again, that's a generalization, but, all these are generalizations, but I think in general, it's true.
I had a question. Oh, go ahead, Carrie.
Oh, okay, thanks. When you first started out, were you more sub-consultant to lots of architects, or how did you make this transition to becoming more of the prime consultant?
We still actually, a lot of our work, we're still subcontracted to architects. We are sometimes the prime, but it's the minority, it's not the majority. And a lot of our work, and maybe because we could probably be better at promotion. We utilize our contacts with architects, and that's like an RFP or our queue comes out, will usually comes through the architects. So that could be just our not being great at following up on those things. But I also think that most jobs, there's an architect, and we don't do huge jobs. It's not like James Corner who gets a giant park, or that all of a sudden you're the prime and you've got all these people working under you. We've had that a few times, but it's unusual. And I think sometimes we're hired directly by like wealthy clients to do residential work. On that front, I think we probably approached more directly than through the architects, because they see our work and they want to work with us, but less so on the larger projects.
Do you find yourself, just a follow-up question, marketing more to architects and spending more time, that it's a big part of your job to market to other professions rather than say speaking within the profession?
Yeah, I do. We do market a lot to architects because that seems like the easiest. I mean, you can identify that, and as I said, we could probably be better at being part of ULI or other things that, you're directly uh, um, meeting, like developers and things like that. A lot of our work is not developer driven. And actually, I think through several recessions, the fact that we have this residential work as a balance has helped us through many recessions, because you know what, rich people always have money, it doesn't matter. And so, so those have kind of balanced us out, where firms that, have relied on a lot of developer work, when the economy goes tanks, boy, they're just boom. And so, so that has been a good thing for us. But I forgot the part of the question. I went on a tangent, sorry.
Oh, just marketing to architects.
Yeah, so we do market to architects, because it seems like that's the easiest, because you can identify them. And then, and then also I think the other way we market is through, well, more before the internet, we would, try and get published a lot, but still now we try and get our work in front of other people through other venues. We have a lot of Instagram followers, and we use social media that way to try and expand our work so that people know about us. And that's kind of our marketing, is more by showing good work rather than approaching people directly, which, as I said, we probably should be better at that.
I have a question, or something I noticed within your presentation was how early on in your career you were either doing projects, but I would consider a world away, whether it was working for the National Park Service and designing campgrounds across the country, or working in Athens and designing for Saudi Arabia. And then you kind of had this shift to when you came to California and started your own firm. What would you say were some of the biggest differences when you're designing for that world away versus designing and implementing where you kind of live?
Well, I think design's an iterative process, and I think you learn. And I think it's hard to have an iterative process when you're working remotely, because there's no feedback loop, or the feedback loop is smaller. I think for me, seeing built work just supercharged my career, because then I was like materiality, and I could see it, and working with the contractors and sort of having the ability to make some changes. I mean, on residential work, you have a lot more ability to make changes in the field than you do on larger projects. You can't suddenly say, hey, I had a great idea, like we're in the middle of construction. But so I think and I think that you just have that immediacy when you're working with on a local project. You can be there, you can see it as it changes, as it evolves, and you are also you're not spending all your time researching. I remember one young woman came to interview with us, and she had worked for a large landscape architecture firm in San Francisco, and they were doing a project in Seattle, and it was a giant project. And I said to her, so who helped you with the planting design? You got 4 years experience or 3 years experience. She goes, oh, I did research from books. I was like, oh, wow, that's really good. There's nothing like, years of experience or consulting with someone who has years of experience to make it work. And she obviously did not get the job, but, I just think that there's such a learning curve to learn a new environment, unless you have really good sub-consultants to help you out. I think I think your work is either going to be mediocre, or you're going to have to, if you don't have those people, because you're not willing to take chances, and I think when you work locally, you can like expand yourself more because you have deep local experience. So I'm a big advocate for that.
Yeah. All right, well, I have one last burning question, and that is, how have you incorporated your love for animals today, even though you didn't get to go into animal sciences?
I've had dogs. I had a number of dogs over the years, but right now we just have a couple cats. One adopted us, and the other one we got as a mouser because we had mice. So I can't. I'd like to get dogs again someday, and but yeah, I know it's important. It's a big it's a big chunk missing from my life that I would like to bring back when I have more time, but animals take time and I don't have a lot of time.
Well, thank you so much for your time today, and thank you to all our audience members for tuning in. You can find, again, this recording will be posted in the next couple of days in case you want to pass it on to any of your friends or colleagues. So thank you and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for your time. Bye.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Chris.